They have 10 picks over the first 6 rounds, so they're going to get some of these people that have not been picked. They do not need wide receiver help. Andre Rison may not be a factor for the Rams. They picked up 2 wide receivers in last year's draft. They got Aaron Cox was a #1 pick, and of course Flipper Anderson went in the 2nd round. So they're pretty well set at wide receiver. They might be looking at Cleveland Gary also. Could be interesting here for the Rams, and they pick 21st here in the 1st round. Let's go out to Winnetka, Illinois, and Andrea Kramer.
And thank you. We are back at Steve Zucker's house. We are downstairs. Louis Oliver is upstairs. He does not want to talk to anybody, does not want to see anybody, will not come down, which is understandable. Some are saying that his stock is falling. Nobody seems to know why. One interesting thing, though, is that the 49ers have just called to talk to Louis Oliver. We do not know why. Back to New York and Chris Berman.
All right, Andrea, and there's the Broncos pick is in the hands of the commissioner, Pete Rozelle, presiding over his 30th draft today.
Denver Broncos. Denver's 1st-round selection, Steve Atwater, defensive back, Arkansas. Next up, Los Angeles Rams.
Louis Oliver is there at that position, and Steve Atwater, a guy who several scouts told me they really like, but a guy who's a safety didn't quite seem to project as Oliver. So there goes our theory about Mike Harton and Dennis Smith out the window. Maybe, although they can't play forever, Tommy. Denver has gone with the safety. You surprised?
Well, I'm surprised if you were going to go with a safety that you wouldn't go with Oliver. There must be an unspoken reason why they have not. But I think that Dennis and Mike, even though they are aging slightly, are both at the caliber of being Pro Bowl performers. Certainly, you get a guy behind him, he's going to help, and they need all kinds of defensive help, as Joe has said before.
Well, I think the important thing that Tommy brings up also is Atwater's going to help him now. This draft, if there's anything in this draft as far as depth goes, it's in defense. So they can make this pick now. They can take the luxury, and there may be that defensive lineman left out. Don't forget now, Denver also has the 2nd pick of Cleveland's, which could allow them to make a deal as well. So I think we're going to start to see some trades coming up. I mean, this is something that surprised me. I felt like there would be more deals made in this particular draft, particularly in the late rounds, than there have been at this point.
Atwater, a guy that had 70 tackles last year from his safety spot at Arkansas. 15 career interceptions with Arkansas, and now he goes into Denver, and let's face it, they have been saying that they need new defense. They certainly need a pass rusher. We thought it would be Bill Hawkins, but in Steve Atwater, there's a guy that really has improved his ranking in the last week or so. He has been moving up. Next up are the Rams with the first of their 2 first-round selections. For more on what Denver has done, and there you see the Rams on the horn. Again, it's a long-distance call. Let's go over to Bobby and Mel.
Okay, Chris, I think Tommy touched on it. An unspoken reason, whether a perception forms in the mind of a scout or player personnel people along the way, whether there are rumors, founded or unfounded, whether there's just something you see. Louis Oliver is still out there. Andre Rison is still out there. The Rams are up with about 12 minutes to go. Then comes Indianapolis. You heard Andrea Kramer say, though, that the phone call has come in. The Niners wanting to talk to Louis Oliver. Before we get to other matters, do you think they would be of a mind to trade up maybe with the Rams or the Colts to get a shot at him at this point, not anticipating that shot before?
Well, I think you have to look at it and look at Louis Oliver as a sliding player. When that starts to happen, everybody starts to wonder why. But I think that if you look at Oliver and you look at Rison, you have the Indianapolis Colts and you have the Pittsburgh Steelers on the horizon. I know the Steelers, for one, would love to have Rison. Indianapolis has wide receiver needs opposite Brooks. And, of course, Oliver would fit in there as well. But I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are the team that could come out of this draft with 2 outstanding offensive players if, in fact, a guy like Rison is still there. And even if he isn't, Lawyer Tillman from Auburn is a player that would really look good in the Steeler uniform. So Pittsburgh, with Worley and one of these 2 receivers, is going to do a great job surrounding Brister with the kind of skilled people he really needs to be a great quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, whether these are reaches or whether these are just some great intuitive moves that will be hailed into the 90s when you look back on the draft of '89 as master strokes of genius, we can't say right now, but we can say the Rams have about 11 minutes to go. The Colts, Houston, then Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh with their 2nd first-round selection. Then comes Chicago, the Rams again. So the Rams have needs. And right now, John Robinson and John Math trying to decide what to do because they have opportunities they didn't think they would have at this moment. We're waiting on them. We'll wait for you to come right back with us. We'll be back.
Dennis Smith and Mike Harden over there, but a message, Tommy, here?
Well, I think that one thing people have to understand, you're looking for depth, but also Dennis, although he's a Pro Bowl caliber player, last year missed a few games. He's missed a few games in previous years. He's had injury problems. And Dan is a guy, as a head coach, who likes to see you on the field all the time, as all head coaches would. But I think he may be sending a slight message to Dennis that either stay healthy and be on the football field, or we'll have to try to move somebody else in there.
The Rams, for the second time in 2 years, last year they had 2 1s and 3 2s. There you go. It's hard to say that, but they had 5 in the first 2 rounds. Same thing this year. They got their 2 1s and they've got a bunch of 2s. Last year they picked among their first 3 selections a couple of wide receivers, Aaron Cox and also Willie Anderson in the second round. So, I mean, here's Risen. We're trying to put him somewhere. If they don't go, please, Joe, I think the Colts are going to take him, aren't they?
We'll find a place for him somewhere, Chris. We're going to find a kid a home someplace, somehow. He's too good not to go in the first round. He can help some football team. I don't believe it's going to be the Los Angeles Rams. I think with Jackie Slater getting a little bit older, it's going to be an offensive lineman, some offensive help. The reason why is Fritz Shermer has gone to that multi-linebacker type defense. So their need for a defensive lineman, a nose tackle, a defensive end, is not as great as one would seem in a football team. I look for the Rams to go offensive tackle and in Indianapolis to come up and probably find a home for Risen. He'd like it there in the Midwest. Just drop down from Michigan and, take a little short trip down.
Plus a dome, and there's a team that like we said, could be going to the playoffs. The Rams, you mentioned the change in their philosophy and defense, but still they lost a lot of their veteran defensive line people. Jeter went to New England. Meisner, they lost in the draft. They also lost to safety Johnny Johnson. The Rams' faces are changing, but, here's a team that is a playoff team, made the wild card last year, and has all these blue chip selections last year and this year. They really ought to make their mark here, shouldn't they?
They got to go defense, Chris. They really have to go defense. It's a situation that they're faced with because they loaded up offensively. They've got to get some help on the defensive side.
All right, let's jump over to Bobby and Mel as their thoughts on the Rams as the first round. We told you it would slow down eventually, and finally it has.
But, a couple of years ago, it was a marathon. It was bloody after a while. 4 hours and 8 minutes back in '87 for the first round. Last year, rather brisk 3 hours and 29 minutes. We're 2 hours and 18 minutes into it, and already well into waiting on the 21st pick. The Rams have 2 selections here in the first round, and they had an outstanding draft last year. In fact, I think they kept 10 players either on the roster or stashing them on injured reserve, which you can't do this year. We'll get into that in a bit. So now the pressure's on to continue. I guess probably the least productive pick they had last year of their prime picks was their first pick, Gaston Green.
Well, they passed on John Stevens, who was the big back that they were looking for, to take an injury-prone runner in Gaston Green, which surprised a lot of people. But, here they had the defensive line needs, but, I'm going to keep repeating the name of Andre Rison. When you're talking about the draft, a lot of people said it was a weak draft or whatever, that there's nobody after the 15th, 20th pick. When teams reach for players, it allows all these good guys that were in the top 10 to slide down. Now teams that are picking between 20 and 28 could get a guy like Rison who is in the top 5 on their board. A lot of people thought Rison might go to Atlanta, might go to Tampa Bay with the 5th, 6th pick. All of a sudden, he might be there for the Colts, for the Steelers. And that's what makes the draft, as far as being an exact science, something that it is.
I have to wonder if John Robinson is, at this point, thinking to himself, maybe I dreamt this. This is a dream. I have a shot here at a Rison or at a Louis Oliver if I want him. Whereas when he got up this morning, it was just not going to happen. This is a team that really took a hard hit, just like the Oilers, probably among the hardest hit on Type B veteran free agency. 37% of the players around the league that had a chance to move did so. And they did so at an average, the bonuses were almost averaging $40,000. And so people left the Rams. They lost 12 players. They lost Gary Jeter. They lost Johnny Johnson. They took some heavy hits.
They did, and they had those defensive line needs going in. That's why Billy Hawkins' name has come up from Miami. If I were the New Orleans Saints, that's who I would have taken. Not Wayne Martin, but a Bill Hawkins. You'll hear Mitchell Benson's name come up in the late first, early second. A big, wide body from TCU would be a heck of a nose tackle for somebody. So there's some names. Of course, Rocker, we're going to be talking about him, but he had plummeted out of the first round possibly, but he was productive, so people are going to consider him as well. This is tough for the Rams. You have Gary, you have Rison, you have Oliver, a lot of great value picks, but you also have the need with the defensive line. This will be one of the more interesting choices in the first round to see what direction Robinson's going to go.
These are choices they didn't think they'd have. These are options they did not anticipate. Mel, your rankings of the top wide receivers already, we can see that, well, Andre Rison was your top one. We had 6 wide receivers taken in the first round.